Okay, so let's talk about what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. We're looking at this incredibly high-stakes military and economic standoff in one of the most important waterways on the entire planet. As of April 2026, there's a ceasefire, but it's fragile, and believe me, the whole world is on a knife's edge.
And that really gets to the heart of the problem, right? The Strait of Hormuz isn't just some regional issue. It's like a global economic artery. So, what happens when someone suddenly puts a clamp on it? Well, the fallout is immediate, and it affects pretty much everyone.
All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the fragile truce, this war on pause. Then the economic warfare that's taken its place. We'll dive into the high-stakes negotiations, the nuclear question that just won't go away, and finally, the incredibly dangerous gamble both sides are taking right now.
So first up, where do things actually stand? The Third Gulf War, which kicked off back in February 2026, is technically on pause. But let's be clear, this is not peace. It's this really uneasy, tense limbo where both sides are just catching their breath and figuring out what to do next.
To really get how we ended up here, you got to look back a bit. That 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was supposed to stop exactly this from happening. But after the US pulled out in 2018 and slapped on years of maximum pressure sanctions, well, tensions just boiled over. So now, after weeks of fighting, a very shaky 2-week ceasefire has brought everyone to the negotiating table. So, with the actual shooting stopped for now, the conflict has just shifted to a whole new battlefield, the economy. Both sides are now using blockades, basically trying to squeeze the other so hard they're forced to give in at the bargaining table.
And this is where we see these dueling strategies. Iran has pretty much closed the strait, but they're doing this controversial thing where they let some ships through if they pay a fee. The U.S. response? A full-on naval blockade of its own. The message couldn't be clearer. If our ships can't pass freely, then neither can yours.
And this blockade is putting an immense amount of pressure on an Iranian economy that was already in trouble. I mean, we're talking a currency that's been tanking, an inflation that was already over 50% before all this. Now, with oil exports cut off, their storage tanks are going to be full in about 2 weeks. That means they have to stop pumping oil, which could permanently wreck their wells. And look at this, food prices have already skyrocketed.
But hey, this economic pain is absolutely a two-way street. Shutting down the Strait of Hormuz is sending shockwaves across the entire global economy. Here in the US, you're feeling it at the pump. Gas prices are up almost 30%. Inflation is creeping up, and analysts are warning that oil could rocket to $150 a barrel. This kind of damage puts a ton of pressure on leaders to find a way out of this, and fast.
So it's this shared economic pain that's basically forced American and Iranian delegations to sit down in Islamabad. The truth is, neither side can really afford for this to drag on, but the gap between what they want, it's massive.
And you can see just how wide that gap is right here. Take uranium enrichment. The US wants a 20-year ban, Iran is only offering 5. What about the enriched uranium they already have? The US says ship it out of the country, Iran says no, we'll just dilute it here. And sanctions? Iran wants every single one of them gone, right now, which the US says is just a non-starter.
You know, this quote from an official who was briefed on the talks really cuts right to the heart of Iran's position. They're facing a potential economic collapse, so their #1 priority is cash. They need immediate financial relief, access to billions in frozen oil money, and the ability to start trading again.
But here's the thing. Even if they somehow manage to work out a deal on sanctions and enrichment, the nuclear issue is far, far from solved. You see, an enrichment ban is really just hitting a pause button, and negotiators are really worried about what Iran could be doing while that button is pressed.
So what are those worries exactly? Well, even with a ban on enrichment, Iran could still be developing more advanced centrifuges, installing them, and perfecting the whole weaponization process. The fear is that the moment the moratorium ends, they could be in a position to make a really quick dash for a bomb.
And all of this, it leads us to this final, really dangerous gamble. The entire situation is balanced on a razor's edge. The whole world is basically just watching these negotiations, waiting to see if we're headed for a fragile peace or a much, much wider war.
So, what do those two paths even look like? Well, path 1 is a shaky peace. They hammer out a deal, the blockades get lifted, and Iran gets its money in exchange for pausing enrichment. It doesn't fix everything, but it pulls everyone back from the brink. Path 2 is grim. The talks collapse, the US follows through on threats to attack Iran's infrastructure, Iran hits back, and the whole region just plunges into a devastating war.
Now, to understand how that war could escalate so quickly, you need to know this term: war-sustaining targets. This is the legal argument the U.S. would use to justify bombing things like Iranian oil facilities. It's a pretty controversial take on international law, basically saying anything that makes money for the enemy is a fair military target. Most countries don't agree, but it's the logic that could be used to justify a huge escalation.
So this leaves us with one last really critical question. This whole standoff has become a battle of economic will, right? Each side is trying to hurt the other enough to make them back down. But in this kind of fight, where the global economy is the actual battlefield, is it even possible for anyone to win? Or is it possible that in the end, both sides just lose?